Hello, hello. I am so excited for y'all to meet Abby on today's episode. So, Abby Thomason is an early childhood play therapist. She's based in Kansas City, and you can find her on Instagram at Early Emotions. And she's had a really interesting trajectory to building her private practice because, first and foremost, she is a mom of two little ones, and she left the field of social work to really be a stay at home mom because that role and identity came first, that time with her kids came first. And when she was on maternity leave, she ended up deciding to start her Instagram as just sort of like a way to give back, educate her community, sort of like feel in her zone of genius again. And things really started to take off. And so she started her private practice slowly, sort of built it up over time, and now has a pretty full private practice doing mobile play therapy across Kansas City. And I think what you're really going to enjoy about this episode is sort of how Abby thinks about things and is still really prioritizing time with her family and life as a mom. But because she's really shifted, like how she's shown up on Instagram, she shifted her rates, she shifted how she structured her business, her schedule. She's able to spend even more time at home with her kiddos. She's the one picking them up, dropping them off every day, hanging out with them after school, while also still doing the work that she loves. And she's more than doubled her income in the process. You guys are really going to enjoy this episode. Abby is such a delight. So tune in. Hi, Abby. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're located, who you help as a therapist.
So, I am a registered play therapist, clinical social worker. I am in the Kansas City area, and I do mobile play therapy. So, I go into homes and schools in the area, and then I also work with parents virtually.
Very cool. And you did things a little bit differently, right? In that you started your Instagram page before you actually started your private practice.
Yes, so I was kind of backwards. So, I was a stay at home mom, like fully stay at home, did not have another job for about a calendar year.
Mm-hmm.
And then I really felt like I was missing my therapy side, my therapist brain. And I was like, how can I use this time to kind of get that outlet? And I started my Instagram page and just kind of putting information up there for parents and not following my kids' life or anything, but just really focusing on how like play therapy can actually be utilized through like a parent lens.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that gets disconnected where parents bring kids to play therapy and then they feel like they're not as connected in the process. And there's a lot that can be
Mm.
done at home for parents to support their kids too.
Yeah. What does that look like for parents to sort of like take a more active role in their kids' play therapy?
So that was my biggest kind of thing about starting my practice is because I felt like there was such a disconnect. I came from schools and there's naturally a disconnect there
Mm-hmm.
because, they're with you all day at school and then they go home and there's not time for like the parents as much as like, just parent teacher conferences or whatever.
Yeah.
But I would hear a lot from my clients who said, we tried play therapy, but they'd go in and then they'd say, see you later. And I got an update every once in a while, but I didn't know how to continue things at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I have always had a love and passion for early childhood. So I really niched into early childhood. It's always been my background where I've worked in schools. And that is a time of childhood that's so important to focus that parent child relationship on.
Yeah.
Um, so I really structured my sessions and my availability around making sure that parents would feel really included through the process. So I would have like the majority of the pricing would be on the play therapy session itself, but I would add way more affordable options for parents to add on a session for themselves.
Uh-huh.
So they would feel like it wasn't like they would have to be paying double to be a part of the process, but they could be a part of it and have weekly sessions for us to kind of talk through this is kind of what I'm seeing here. Here's how we can continue it at home. And here's how you can kind of build that connection and things you can be doing to kind of stretch out what we're doing in therapy.
Yep. And so when you were sort of like coming back from maternity leave and thinking about how to restart your career as a therapist, were you planning to go into private practice when you started your Instagram page, or was it more just
No,
like educational?
no. And so what I did, and we'll probably get into this a little bit, but there's very little options available for moms who want part-time work.
Yeah.
And so what I did is I was in schools. I was in early childhood special education when I had my first daughter in 2019, and I loved that job. And I told, everybody I worked with, they were like, I don't know, I'm worried you might leave. And I was like, no, I will never leave. Like, I love this job so much. Also, getting an early childhood, social work job is so specific. There's only like a
Yeah.
handful of them in the area, right? Um, so I was like, I'd never leave. And then my daughter came and I was like, I can't be away. Like, I got to be home. So I found, I was working through the state of Missouri through First Steps, which is like an in home program for birth through three early childhood kiddos with disabilities.
Hmm.
So I did that part time, did that a little bit part time through the birth of my second daughter in 2021, but private practice was never even on the radar. And it wasn't until my daughter was in preschool and I was at school dropping her off one day, and there was a kiddo who was really struggling separating from their parent. And I was talking to the director of the preschool. I was like, listen, this is what I used to do. I really have a passion for it. I don't know if there's any connection, like if you guys ever needed like social skills classes or
Yep.
any kind of play therapy groups in school, like I would love to do that. And we kind of started something there. And she said to me, do you have a private practice, or would you ever start a private practice? And I was like, oh no, like I'm not a businesswoman. Like I have
Uh-huh.
no desire for that. I am a social worker. I'm a therapist. I'm a play therapist. Like that's my lane and I'm not going to get out of it. Um, so then I had my Instagram page going and I came across your page,
Yep.
um, and explaining how to go through that process. Cause we talk about this all the time. Like grad school does not talk to you about the business side of thing
Yeah.
whatsoever.
I think
Um,
especially for social workers, I think it's probably
yes,
like the worst of all the options because there is this really big assumption that you're going to go into like nonprofits or community mental health. And so I know it wasn't even like a topic or a career option at all that was really discussed.
100%. And there was also the kind of the mindset of a social worker of being in those areas and kind of switching to a businesswoman and looking at money and,
Hmm.
cost and all that stuff, and like building something for yourself that is difficult from the social work side as far as, what we're trained and what we care about and what we're passionate about as far as
Yeah.
like the overall community.
When you started your Instagram page, were you like, did you have, I guess, monetary goals there? Were you like, maybe I'll do like influencership or like start a course or something? Or was it really just like a passion to sort of get the word out there and educate people?
It was honestly a passion. I was
Yeah.
like, I'm a pretty competitive person, so it did get like I cared. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, this worked well, this didn't. How can I tweak this? Like, I kind of get a project and I like go all in on it. So there was that part of it, but it really was. I was like, I don't think this information is readily available
Yeah.
for parents. And when I became a parent, I had the process of being a play therapist before I had kids and then
Hmm.
after. And for me, it was like going through another grad program once you had your own kids,
Yeah.
as far as understanding what the reality of being a parent is, and looking through a kiddo's needs through not only the child's needs, but also the whole family system and the parents.
Yeah, for sure. At what point did you decide, okay, I'm actually going to start the private practice? Was it that conversation at your kid's school or?
So I started with them and I started my LLC. So I just
Yeah.
like did the very base, like registered with the state, um, and started with them. And then I started advertise. Well, actually, I didn't even advertise. My first connections were through Instagram, word of mouth, that
Hmm.
got me connected with like other preschools in the area, and they connected me to a few clients. And I started that way. But my kids were only in preschool. Like I had a kiddo in preschool and a kiddo in Parents' Day Out for 3 days a week for 4 hours. So I was like,
Yeah.
if I can get a couple clients like in that time period, that's awesome. I had no like, I was like, I'd be great with that. Like just a couple with a little extra money. I'm actually getting back in the swing of things and doing what I'm passionate about. But I didn't have like long-term goals as far as what that was going to look like.
Yeah. When did that shift, and did you start kind of taking your business a little more seriously and saying, okay, like I'm really going to go ahead and do this thing?
I think so. My daughter started kindergarten this year. So
Okay.
it was last year that she was in preschool. And I was like, I just don't
Your
have
oldest or your
my
youngest?
oldest, my
Okay.
oldest. But I was like, I don't, I was like, right now we're finishing out this plan as far as childcare. Like, I'm going to stick to these hours. And then I got my youngest in more childcare. And at first I started her at 3 days a week. And then I got busier. And so we were expanding, and I was able to, get her into a longer program. And it was a long process from start of like, I'm going to start my private practice to feeling very, very full right now. But that was also intentional based on like where I was in my stage of life and what I
Yep.
was kind of pushing for.
Yep. How long was that process?
So I had my first client in, shoot, now I'm going to have to think this through. So I'm trying to think. So that was probably in October of 2023. And I was what for me is maxed out, completely full, like at an income and total that I was never expecting 1 calendar year later. I
Yeah.
remember there was only, but again, I was really keeping it small on purpose for a long time. I remember talking to you because when I had decided, I was like, okay, I'm ready to take on more. And I was kind of freaking out because I was like, I don't know where the people are. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. It was kind of this bridge of like, I'm putting my youngest daughter in childcare. I want to have this amount of clients. I want this is what my
Yep.
business to look like. And it was like maybe 6 weeks where I felt this like very like nothing's happening
Yep.
moment. And then I had 1 week where I had a ton of clients calling in. So, in my panicky mind, I was like, I'm a failure. This is not going to work. What am I
Yep.
doing? And then quickly, I was like, okay, you can get over yourself a little bit.
I actually remember that like so clearly. I went back and looked before recording this. So in September, you had posted like a panic, like, I'm feeling discouraged. I'm not
Oh
getting any
yeah,
new clients. What do I do? And then literally 1 week later, you were like, I have a
it was
wait
a week,
list. How
wasn't
do
it?
I handle it? I'm like, what the heck just happened? Um, do you remember what
Yeah.
happened? Like, was there something that went
Um,
super viral, or was it just like everything
no,
started to click and like fall into place?
I think it wasn't like a video went viral. I did ads. I've
Uh-huh.
gotten like a lot of great use out of ads, and you've done a really great job like coaching through how to use those.
Yep.
And man, like I was like doing my taxes this year and I was like, that's all I've spent on marketing. Like
Yep.
when I look at my marketing budget and it's just Instagram, like I don't even use Psychology Today anymore.
Yep.
I never got anybody out of it. So um
Do you have an estimate of how much that is that you spent on ads, or?
I think I spent under $400 for the whole entire year.
Yeah, like that's crazy to
Yeah.
fill an entire caseload.
Yeah. I mean, even that's like about what you would pay for Psychology Today alone.
Yeah, for sure.
So Psychology Today was in, I think Psychology Today might have been included in that total too. So, um, and just one of those things where I started shifting, you recommended shifting kind of my content towards more specific, like showing me, like I did a reel about packing my play therapy kit or come with me on a day of mobile play therapy,
Yeah.
kind of just showing a visual for it. And again, those didn't take off like crazy reels, but I also think they got to the people
Yes.
that needed to see them. And that's where I get stuck sometimes.
Yeah. And it's super hard too, especially because you're somebody who actually has like a pretty decent audience. I think you
Hmm.
had maybe 10,000 followers already when you joined the Private Practice Academy
Hmm.
bundle. Um, And so I think that, in the beginning, especially when we're just focused on that audience growth and we're not really in business building stage, we're chasing like the views or chasing the likes. And that's sort of how we get validation that things are working. But then when we learn, no, actually what we care about is conversions, it
Right.
really shifts things, because oftentimes that content will flop because it is more sales heavy. It is more, educational. It is more you focused, right?
Hmm.
Versus like, here's what the parent's going through and what they need. But if it gets you clients, who cares how many likes it gets, or if it got, a
Yeah.
thousand views instead of 10,000 views. And I think that that's somewhere where people can get really stuck of feeling like they're creating the wrong content. When in reality, we sort of need that combination of all the content, right? Like we do need some
Hmm.
viral stuff to bring people in. So we have people to watch the really good, strong conversion
Right.
content. But not everything is supposed to go super viral.
100%. Yeah. And I think you really helped with that shift. Because man, if you get stuck in that loop of it, it can be really exhausting. Like I get why, first of all, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Instagram is like, if you don't have a system in place, like you make, like I've been on your Reels membership forever. And sometimes I'm doing exactly the reel you sent. Sometimes it sparks another idea for me, sometimes I'm coming up with my own stuff, but it's, and I enjoy the process of it.
Yeah.
So I think that shows through sometimes on your reels and what you make. But when you're just doing it to chase a number,
Yeah.
it can feel really defeating, especially when you see somebody else make one that is really similar to what you make and it like explodes and you're like, I've been making this stuff for,
Yeah.
a year.
What shifted for you in April 2024 when you decided to join the Private Practice Academy bundle? I'm curious, like, what sort of inspired you there to say, I'm going to like invest in this, or I want things to look different?
I am a big fan of learning. I am one of those people who loves continuing education. Like I have like a week long conference coming up this summer and I'm so excited
Fun.
for it. But like, um, I also have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to business. Like I said, I never considered myself, I almost put like people into categories of like the go-getters and like I
Yeah.
didn't think of myself as one. Um, and I had no direction of where I was going. I wanted to make sure I was doing things right. And I followed everything you did. I took multiple free trainings, I think, that
Yeah.
you offered. Um, and I took the one that you offered before the time that I purchased.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was a lot to invest. Like in my mind, I was like, this is an investment.
For sure.
I'm a very cheap human being. um, but I messaged you and you sent me a video like specifically for me back. And
Yeah.
that honestly made like a huge difference that like you weren't just somebody who was trying to tally up as much as you can. Like you did know
Yeah.
what you were doing. You were going to provide support. You were explaining to me kind of like how that investment into your business, can turn around and pay for itself. And oh my gosh, it has like,
Yeah.
um, so it was just that like human to human connection,
Yeah.
I think, that encouraged me to feel like, okay, like this is the time.
I love that. This is definitely a side note off of today's episode topic, but I think that
Uh-huh.
that's so important, because I think as therapists, like that's where we excel, right? Like that's a part of my job that I'm really good at and that I enjoy, is like
Yeah.
interacting with other humans, making them feel seen, validated, helping them feel confident they're in the right place, that I can help them. And, I think for therapists that are in that scaling stage, they can oftentimes totally lose that in the process and just focus on like, what do I see the big marketers doing, right? Like, I'm going to
Yes.
do these emails and I'm going to post my reel and I'm not going to talk to anybody. I'm not going to answer my DMs. I'm not going to give anybody personalized advice. I'm not doing any one-on-one bonuses, because they want to get out of like that one-on-one support. And that's why they're trying to like add in another offer. But I do think that that's super important to never get like too big for that or something, because that is
Totally.
like it's how you build trust with people to
Hmm.
purchase $1,000 course from you, right? Is like by actually stopping and listening and hearing like, okay, here's where Abby's at in her business. This is what she needs. Does this program make sense for her? Which parts is she going to find particularly helpful? And actually taking the time to do that. So I love that you said that, because for me, that's like such an important piece in how I sell. Is I don't want to,
Yes.
have like an assistant on my team just like answering my emails or DMs or something and like telling everyone to join. It is so important to me to make sure that it is a good fit and that, we get to connect and stuff.
Yeah. And I think that like, it's like you said, like there's so much out there that people will reach out and say like, oh, I see your page. And, you could, there's so many bots and there's so many like
Yeah,
huge companies and like not humans doing this. And like,
totally.
also how cool to work with a therapist
Mm-hmm.
and support your business when you're supporting my business. I mean, it's just like this great, like kumbaya, like
Yeah.
therapist supporting therapist thing. But I think my hesitancy at first was like, this is Instagram focused. I've done Instagram. I know how to make a reel. I know how to blah 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 blah. Right? Like
Yeah.
I've done that part. First of all, you only know as much as you know. Like there was
Mm-hmm.
still aspects like so much further down. But for me, it was also the now what I love is I can go back as I'm ready to expand to hiring, and I can
Yeah,
go back and watch the module on hiring, or brand deals, and I can go back and do the brand deal
totally.
module. Um, but like the setting up your business with Instagram as your marketing piece
Mm-hmm.
was a great, like I didn't have that. I
Yeah,
was I was creating content to create content. I wasn't creating content with a path in mind.
right. To get clients.
Yeah.
What were you charging for? Well, even before that, when you started doing mobile play therapy, I'm curious if that came out of like a need for the community or like feeling like that was the best fit for families, or was it sort of like this is a way to decrease overhead and be like virtual but still, or be in person without having to like purchase an office, or some combination of the two?
It was a combination. I
Yeah.
remember and especially because where I was at in my life, um, you know, at the time I had 4 hours, 3 days a week to have a rent of an office
Mm-hmm.
and hope the clients eventually came when who I could fit in that time didn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
And I love working with kids. I'm a play therapist, right? But I was like,
Yeah.
maybe that is not my time yet because I need to wait till I build enough with working with parents because I really only worked with parents at first.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe my time will get to the point where I can have an office and I can see kids again. But we actually had a conversation again
Mm-hmm.
on a group call of like going through my page, and it was like all of my content is play therapy, all of my, like this is clearly what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
It looks like you're advertising like you're playing that you see kids, like all of this stuff. Um, and I was like, why don't I just offer mobile?
Yeah.
And that will help. I won't have to worry about overhead with an office. It helps with like you know, the time period that I'm sure a lot of people struggle with of like, first you get the office and then you have that period of pain until you're full
Yeah.
enough to
For
actually
sure.
pay for it. Right. Honestly, I don't know if I will get an office at
Yeah.
this point. I love being mobile. Not only do I think it fits kids the best, I'm meeting kids where they are. So we're not going through, especially when I work with littles, we're not going through the scary process of you're in a new building and you're having to go into this room with this woman you don't know. And
Yeah.
the rapport building and everything's going much faster. I think it's also in families' interest. Like, um, I work with a lot of parents who have very busy careers, and for them to have to take, really probably hours off every single week to go pick up their kid, drive however far they'd have to do to get to me,
Yeah.
drive however far to get back to school. Um, it's not in family's best interest, and I think that it's holding back families from getting support because of that piece. So if I can take that out,
Yeah.
um, I think that that's a game changer.
Are you mostly going into schools or to families' homes or?
So I do a combination. If they are in schools, public schools are don't usually let outside therapists in. They have social workers and counselors, like they kind of like stay, which I totally get. I
Yeah.
was a school social worker. I also tell parents too, like if we're just seeing kind of minor things and you're not sure about therapy, to start there,
Yeah.
because you have resources built in. But if it's a daycare or a private school, I'm usually going into the school. Or if they're in public schools, usually parents are bringing them home. I work at the home, and then they're either done for the day or they go back to school. So that
Yeah.
is still limiting that barrier, because if you're in public school, you live like 5 minutes from your school
Totally.
versus having to drive 20 minutes across town every single time.
Yep. What does your schedule look like? Like, are you seeing mostly people when your kids are also in school? Or are you having to do a lot of like evenings or late afternoons and stuff to sort of make schedules work with families?
So I drew that boundary for myself.
Yep.
I really want to, like, when I felt kind of empowered and that I can create my job how I want my job to work. Um, I don't take kiddos, like my last session is 2
Yep.
o'clock, so that I can be able to pick up my daughter from school. And then I, can take both my kiddos home and I have the whole afternoon with them
Hmm.
right now. And I'm really trying to hold on to this boundary as more people are calling, but keeping Fridays as my office day so I
Yep.
can do things like this, so I can network with people, get my documentation done. So that side of things is not bleeding into my time with my kids. Um, so I've been able to keep it to that, but I am looking to hire because it's starting to bleed out and I don't want
Yep.
that to happen.
You're getting like more inquiries and you can fit
Yeah.
into the set schedule that you want for yourself.
Yeah. And there's a lot of puzzle piecing that goes into mobile, of course. Like,
Hmm.
I've gotten to a good part now, I think, where I'm keeping the people that are as close together physically as possible on certain days. And parents are usually very understanding with, like, okay, I have this new kiddo coming up, but to get them in, I would have to move this kiddo, like, so
Yep.
sometimes we're switching. But I do try to keep it as consistent as possible for my families, but they're pretty flexible about working with me to make it happen.
Yep. That's awesome. What do you charge for mobile play therapy? And what did you charge in the beginning too?
So my first sessions that I did for virtual sessions, I did child parent relationship therapy individually with parents, and that was $100 a session. So that was like my
Hmm.
first thing that I did. And then you were really encouraging raising rates. And again, before I didn't even know what. I didn't come from a private practice before, right? Like I
Yeah.
came from no private practice experience. Um, and so I kind of set up my program to fit different time periods options. So they kind of have options as far as what they want to choose. So for a 30-minute play therapy session that's mobile, where I come to them, it's
Hmm.
$150. That session time is really great for my littles, as far as like we get a lot out of that time. And it's a really appropriate time for their age group.
Yep.
I also allow parents to add on and make it an hour for 200. So it's
Hmm.
$200 for an hour session. And what that looks like is either if I go to the school, so sometimes I go to the school, see a kiddo for half an hour, and then I have a virtual session with the parent later that week.
Yep.
Sometimes if it's at home, either the parent wants me to have the whole hour with the kiddo, or we have parent time where, like, I'll get there, the kiddo will go off for a little bit. I'll check in with mom and dad for 15 minutes or however long they need. And then I spend the rest of the time with my kiddo.
Yep.
I really sell it to them and explain it to them. The nice thing about the hour, if they're available, is some weeks there might be like, mom really needs some support. Like this week was awful. I don't know how I handled this, blah, 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 blah. And we do less time with the kiddo, or the kiddo needs more time. We can be really flexible with that time.
Yep. For sure. Very cool. I love that you also sort of structure the payment in a way that really incentivizes doing the full hour, and letting the parents get that support.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, to be honest, like there's some social worker having a hard time being like, this is what my fee is. Like we talk about like having to kind of um, process that with yourself as far as like,
Yeah.
this is what I'm charging. Um, Also, like as I'm going, I think that, you know, And what I'm learning that other people, it's typical for $150 session for a session at home or at an office that's private pay. So it's like for me to come into your home and, because we talked about too, I was asking about structuring pricing and I was like, do I do like a travel fee
Yeah.
or something like that on top of it? Because I'm traveling like up to 30 minutes to these areas
Yeah,
sometimes. And that could be time technically that I'm with another client.
for sure.
So it needs to be it needs to make sense, right?
How was it for you to start charging $200 per hour? I feel like that's a pretty big jump from the 100, and especially in an area like Kansas City. Yeah, I'm curious what came up for you there.
Yeah, that was hard. And it feels hard to talk about, like I
Mm-hmm.
think that especially, you're a social worker, I'm a social worker, like we are very aware of the realities of the world and mental health is not accessible to people. And that
Oh,
is um, something I struggle with. It's something that I want to build big enough that I can have more options, either interns or some, that can provide lower cost options.
yeah.
But I, it's what made sense for me to be able to do what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's why I really wanted to offer the lower priced option. And I was able to do that with it to make sense with the time frame.
Yeah.
Um, and I refer out if parents aren't okay with that or can't do that right now. But I haven't gotten any concerns about it
Yeah.
with people that are calling me. Excuse me. One thing that you talk about in PPA is listing your fees on your website. And I think
Yeah.
that is huge. That at first made me like uncomfortable. I was like, people are going to see and judge or whatever. Um, but I also, when I do intro calls, send over a link. Like I have a fees page and I send that link over of like, just so you know, if you want to look over this ahead of time, let me know if this doesn't seem like a good fit of you and you want to, look for other options. I can send you those as well.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a small one person show right now. And
Mm-hmm.
so it doesn't need to be, I'm not looking to have 25, 30 clients at a time.
Yeah.
Um, so it's great for the parents and the families that need and can afford it and kind of navigating as far as the providing direction to different options if they can't. Or I also really try to include as much education as I can on my Instagram. And
Yeah.
that's just free time. I mean, honestly,
For
like,
sure.
um, and that's a chunk. I'm sometimes filming reels in the car in between sessions, like to get
Yeah.
some information out there. So I really do try to give as much um, concrete support through my Instagram page as well.
Yeah, I think Instagram can be such a great place to like give back and sort of provide that free
Mm-hmm.
education. And then at the end of the day, like, you're a mom of two young kids. Like, you have to sort of prioritize what works for you in your business. And I think by
Mm-hmm.
being transparent and upfront about what that is, you're like not wasting anybody's time. You're not having them
Yeah.
get excited that like you're going to be the perfect solution for them. They're able to sort of make that decision and decide, does this work for me and my family too? And if not, then, you've got other options available for them.
Yeah. And I think that, you've talked about this too of like therapists are mainly women
Yeah.
and that impact on like as a woman feeling like going after something or building a business or doing all these things, or if I was in any other industry, would I have this kind of guilt or pressure or whatever about creating my business
Yeah.
the way that I want to create my business? Like, that's a side of the coin to consider as well. Like, I am extremely qualified. I'm very good at what I do. Like, I am very specific to a specific group of people that honestly don't have a lot of resources specific to early childhood and play therapy.
Yeah.
And it's okay that I get paid accordingly.
Yeah. What does your schedule look like these days? And like, how does that impact your life as a mom?
So I am, well, I consider working full time because Fridays are my like office days, but
Yeah.
I take my daughter to school at 8 o'clock and then I am out for the day. So I am finding my offices between sessions like at Panera or wherever, like
Yeah.
documenting in between. But I am typically out from drop off until pickup
Yeah.
at, I'm in the parking lot at 3 o'clock to go pick her up. So I'm full for that time. But really, I mean, if you look at the hours spent, how long she's in school, like
Yeah.
7 hour days or less. And I've really tried to spread out. I was trying to fit, I mean, I didn't have lunchtime for some days and I was trying to go
Hmm.
3 days a week and it just wasn't good for me. So or for my clients, like
Yeah.
once you get to that number at the end of the day, you're like, okay, like I need to spread this out.
Yes, for sure.
So that's when I added Mondays. And so I'm Monday through Thursday with clients and then Fridays home.
Awesome. Has that had like a big financial difference compared to when you worked full time in schools?
Yes. Yeah. Um, which is wild. Because, as a social worker, you're told very early on in grad school that don't expect to make any money
Yeah.
or, just don't even think. And again, I didn't. That was not what I was in it for. That's not what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
Um, and then when you're on your own and setting up, your own processes and setting up your career exactly how you would build it. I mean, if this was listed on a
Hmm.
website of a job, I'd be like, oh my God, like, what do I have to do to get this job? And I was able
Yeah.
to create it for myself, which is awesome. And then, yes, you look at like the financial differences and like, um, it's more than double what I would have made working full time, where my kids would be in aftercare and, I just wouldn't have the time with them that I was able to kind of
Hmm.
carve out and create through creating my own thing.
That's huge to be able to get like that extra time with your kids and be the one doing drop off, pick up, like hanging out after school,
Yeah.
and also have like such a big financial difference too is amazing.
It's kind of shocking. Like it's just kind, you know what I mean? It's kind of like one of those like pinch me things.
Yeah. Is this real?
Yeah, seriously. And it's just like, because you know, and I am very aware of like, I was a stay at home mom. So we were depending on my husband's um, income already, as far as
Mm,
like, I know that I am very privileged in that situation because I could deal with the time to kind of build up and all of that stuff. Um, but I know a lot of stay at home moms or previous school social workers or school counselors or whatever that are now home with their kids, like, are probably in the same boat of like, I have all this education and all this to offer. And part of what I want to do when I set up people I hire is the same thing, like giving other moms who are
mhm.
therapists the opportunity to make a little extra money, good money,
Yeah.
with their extra time too, and have it fit their schedule because um, what a gift is it that you can work and be with your kids. Like, unfortunately, the system isn't set up for that
Yeah.
in general, like, unless you carve that out for yourself.
Like I think just the traditional 9 to 5 jobs, like you're really forced to pick. Is it like family or, career or finances? And so to be able to have like a really full, thriving career and not sacrifice your family life in the process is just amazing.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes we don't, it has to be one or the other in the sense of like,
Mm,
um, I have to be going 100% in this section and 100% in this section. And it doesn't have to be that way. Like, if, especially like any therapist listening, like, there's so much potential for you to even have, like, I started with a couple clients when my kids were at
yeah.
Mother's Day out. Like, there's just this side of private practice that is so flexible um, and needed. I mean, that's the
Hmm.
thing, is like, there's only so many play therapists. There's only so many therapists out there. Like, and there might be a period to kind of get revved up, but there's just so many options these days as far as virtual or mobile or whatever, so that you can create something without the scary overhead of what traditionally would have been like paying for a full office or anything like that. And
Yeah. And I think too, like, I think that so often our brains can be so black and white with it of
Hmm.
like, oh, if I don't have time to see 15 or 20 clients a week, there's no point in starting. Right. But if you do the math and you're like, okay, let me charge $200 per session, you see what, 4 clients a week, and that's like $3,000. Like, that's, I don't know. When I got out of grad school, my first job was $38,000 a year, right?
Uh-huh.
Working 40 plus hours per week in New York City. And so, I think that there's just like so much freedom and flexibility for people when they decide to start and to
Hmm.
try. And, of course, there's other work that goes into it with marketing and networking and all of that. But I think it's so much more doable than people really think.
Absolutely. And it's getting over that hump of like, I can do this.
Hmm.
Like, I'm, I don't know, like, if you're a therapist and you've gone through all this training and you've been passionate about like the area that you're passionate about, like, you are like, I think it's hard for us to feel like sometimes like we have so much to offer that we're specifically like we are very highly qualified individuals.
Yeah.
So you can do this. Like this, even though this is like a different realm, like the business world is kind of a
Hmm.
whole different pocket. Um, you've done all this and you have this to offer. Like you can do the business side
Yeah.
and all of that too.
Awesome.
And my first out of grad school job was $1,500, $500,
Yeah.
18,000 bucks a
That's
year. Like that's
crazy.
wild.
Yeah.
I don't even think that's minimum wage.
Yeah. I'd like to think about where you're at now. I think is just like such a huge difference.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Abby, for sharing all of your wisdom with us today. Where can folks find you on Instagram?
I'm at Early Emotions on Instagram.
Amazing. All right. I will talk to you soon.